Next on our program, we're going to hear from Dr. Elizabeth Roberts. And Dr. Roberts has a really unique history. She was a peace worker with Dr. Martin Luther King from 1965 to 1967, and she credits that work with really being the impetus for her life direction. And if you just take a few minutes at some point to read her full bio, you will see how accurate that is. She served on peace teams in Nicaragua and Burma and Iraq, and is editor of the best-selling book, Earth Prayers. So I think we're really privileged to have her here tonight. So I would like to welcome her up to provide some words for us tonight. Welcome, Dr. Roberts.
What a privilege to follow that beautiful talk that we just heard. It was a wonderful reminder of why we're gathered here, to honor Dr. King, but also to honor the movement, as he continually said. He worked in a team. He was not a solo guy. Decisions were made in a team and a collective. And he called men and women around the country over a decade to step up. And by God, we stepped up. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, blacks and whites. He was a leader and a prophet for whites as much as for blacks. His mission was clear and he never lost that focus, but I never felt he wasn't my spiritual father as well. I was 19 in 1965 when I first had the chance to become involved with working. I knew about the civil rights. I was going to a Jesuit university. My teachers were working down south. But I knew what the news told me. And we all know about that now. So I was 19 and I came into one of my college classes, and instead of my usual professor, there was a young black man dressed in a black suit and a thin black tie standing in the front of my class. And in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you didn't encounter very many blacks. You might have been pro-civil rights, but you didn't actually, unless you went out of your way, which most of us didn't, you didn't encounter many blacks. So this young man told us students that where he had come from, young black boys and girls were being beaten up, attacked by dogs, having their lives threatened, and the media wasn't covering it very much. Just weren't hearing about it enough. So he was there to propose and suggest that if more white boys and girls went down and got beaten and attacked by dogs and hosed, the media might cover it. And he was from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he was there to recruit. I thought it was the call of a lifetime. For whatever reason, when we get the call, it's one of those things that you can't not do it. You can't stay yourself and not do it. So a few days later, I was on a bus with half a dozen other students from my university going down to Selma, Alabama. I was young, I believed, and yet I saw more black people in those first few days than I'd ever seen in my life, and I knew that racism was still inside me. I didn't understand them. I didn't know what was happening, but I was just picked up, a tide of good people, young people, a tide of nuns and priests and ministers, and we began to work. The first march in Selma had taken place. It was a couple of hundred people led by someone else, and it got turned back at the bridge. I went down for what would be called the second walk. Dr. King flew in for it to Selma. It was part of the voter registration drive in Alabama. It was a march from Selma to Montgomery. I know you all know it. And there were about 3,000 of us came together. And we trained. We trained in nonviolence. We were coached in how to love your oppressor. We were coached in how to stand steady if dogs attacked us. It wasn't just some simple idea. We practiced loving our enemy. So we went out on the bridge, and of course, it was again based in the face of the violence that was arrayed against us. Dr. King made the decision to not go on to Montgomery. It was a great disappointment. For me, there was a little bit of a relief. I was scared. I was, being brave and singing my songs, and my knees were wobbling, and I was thinking, how did I get here? And we decided to turn back again. And as we went away, the black sheriff and his policemen and his dogs and his cattle prods ran after us and attacked us anyway. And I remember having to go through my head, why are they doing this? We didn't do anything wrong. We didn't cross the bridge. We didn't, and then I got racism. The blacks didn't do anything wrong. The 25% of the children in our country who live below poverty haven't done anything wrong. The people in New Orleans haven't done anything wrong. The people who can't afford health care haven't done anything wrong. The immigrants in this country haven't done anything wrong. That's racism. That's structural violence. That's what Dr. King was about. And for me it was, I had white privilege. You had to break a law or do something wrong to get in trouble. I really got it. They haven't done anything wrong. And that's still true today. That's one way we can know where we should stand and where we should go. Dr. King went on to request a permit to walk to Montgomery. President Johnson refused it and gave a restraining order. Dr. King made the decision to engage in civil disobedience and take the march anyway, as he so often said, and as we were just reminded, colluding with an immoral law is itself immoral. So the final walk, in which tens of thousands of people came, whites and blacks, 30, 40,000, made the walk, 4 days of rain. I remember it still. We walked for 4 days through the rain, people bringing us food, sleeping in houses and church basements, and we were ecstatic. We were jubilant. We had overcome. Where did this energy come from? This was 10 years to the day when Rosa Parks decided she didn't want to give up her seat in the bus. And Dr. King, at age 26, took national leadership, what would become national leadership. 26 years old was what he was. 27 years old when his house was bombed, and he stood forth with the, we will not retaliate with violence, when he took the moral high ground. 10 years later, we were in Montgomery, and I would work back and forth between my university and coming down to Alabama on voter registration and housing organization for the next couple of years, actually. When you're doing something like that, you're not aware that you're doing something for someone else. It was so clear to me that what was happening for me down there, for my soul, was what I was tending. These people were tending my soul. There was a part of reality I had no experience with, that I didn't know. There was a whole black experience I didn't know. There was a whole togetherness experience I didn't know. There was a whole power of nonviolence that I didn't know. And my soul was sucking it up. I was learning. He was nourishing all of us. The energy came from his great vision of what was possible. Dr. King was always true to the possible. He had great faith in this country. I know that was just said, and I want to remind us again, because it's been hard to have great faith these years. I don't know about you, but I've been down. I've been discouraged at times. I was in Iraq with my husband before the war, simply once again to make a gesture. I didn't think I could stop my country from bombing who had decided it was going to bomb. But I wanted the Iraqis to know that there were lots of us who stood with them as America massed its armaments and massed its war. And I went over there again for me, because I was so depressed. I was so discouraged with what was happening. The only thing I knew to do was to show up. We can all show up. And when we show up, we're lifted. We're lifted into the dream that King had for this country, the beloved country. We're lifted into recognizing that what we dream can be. We need to remember that now. And that dream was based on the spiritual vision that we will not other anyone else. We will not put anyone outside the boundaries of our heart. We will not act in violence, and we will not feel violence. Now, to not feel violence to someone who looks at your face and spits at you, or calls, as they called me, right, white bitch, what are you doing here? I mean, to remember love, this is going to church. To remember to love. To remember to read the morning newspaper and not get annoyed with President Bush. Don't spend your energy. Don't fuss over him. It isn't worth it. Do what you are called to do. And don't worry about a lot of guilt about what you aren't able to do. We spend far too much time with that too now. I have people who don't want to hear about social action because they don't want to be made to feel guilty. Everyone can show up. Show up to your teenager. Show up to your elderly parent. Be present. Make the gesture. Stand alongside. And don't put anyone outside of the boundaries of your heart. So maybe that's the first thing I learned. Follow the call. Listen for it. Work in teams. That was something else I learned. Work together. Work in community. Build community through the work you are doing. Hold a big vision. Hold one that encompasses succeeding. Well, you don't know what you're going to succeed at. I think in my work down in the South, and all my work since then, I haven't known what was going to happen. We're not in charge. I think we're called not to succeed, but to be faithful. Don't worry about succeeding. Be faithful to what you know and to what your heart tells you. Sometimes I wait for a great leader like Dr. King to emerge again. A great charismatic leader who will bind up enough of this country, ground our action in spirit once again. But this is our moment. And to waste that moment waiting for someone else to come and inspire me to act is to give away what Dr. King would never want us to give away, our moment. He lived to his time. He followed his call. He lived what destiny brought him. And this is the only chance you and I will have to do that. So be brave, be strong, be inspired, and have faith. Thank you all. God bless you.